Today, I've researched an old vintage camera that has recently entered the collection, and we're going to talk about it. This is the this is the Minolta Freedom Zoom 90. We've been looking at a lot of Polaroids week to week, but let's break up the monotony a little bit and look at a Polaroid. Wait right into a Minolta. This is pretty cool. It looks more traditional of the cameras that, what you'd see today. Roll of film goes in, comes right around, got some P-zoom there in case you need some P-zoom. Shutter release. Looks like there's a timer function, flash built in. Very cool. We come around to the front. Not entirely sure what this does, but it's a back and forth toggle. So maybe, I bet that's the zoom control, honestly. I couldn't find a manual for this one. And then we've got a setting here to go between your flash, your Pac-Man, or something else, because that's definitely what all those symbols are. Cool. Let's actually get to what I was able to research about this camera. The Minolta Freedom Zoom 90 was manufactured in 1991, according to one site. Same year I was born. But the copyright date on an ad for this camera is dated 1989. What do you want to bet that the 90, it was released in the year 1990? Just kidding. It's the zoom. It goes 38 to 90 millimeter. That's why it's called that. It was also called the Minolta Riva Zoom 90C and the Minolta Apex 90 are other versions of this. So maybe it's the same camera, maybe they made tweaks for it, or possibly for different markets. They often change up names depending on if it's releasing in the US or England or Japan. As far as the price goes, I couldn't actually dig up an image of the vintage ad to see what was on there. The link was broken, but the metadata on that link mentioned that it was taken from the July 1989 issue of Time magazine, and the price was $12.95. With a quick inflation calculator, it works out to be $33.18 today. That's it? $30 for a camera? Nice. I bet this takes better photos than a $30 camera would today. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, there's an ad for this on YouTube that I will put a link to in the description, and I highly recommend you go watch it because this is hilarious. The Freedom Zoom video from the 90s just screams 90s commercials. Talks a lot about the zoom by bringing the action to you, and they show this by literally having like a guy in a canoe in a boat lift up into the air and then float towards the person with the camera, and like the kids are in the lake and they come up out of the air like they were playing with green screen and they were lifting people and floating them closer to the camera as they bring the zoom to you with their it was ridiculous. Less about the history of this camera and more about the history of my collection in these videos we're making. This is the first point and shoot style camera, I believe, that we've ever looked at before here. The point and shoot style lens that's built into it is a 38 to 90 millimeter. And the aperture can go as wide as 3.5 millimeters if you are fully on the 38 millimeter, fully zoomed out, or f7.7 when you're fully zoomed in. Also, that vintage ad that I mentioned, it talks about an optional zoom extender to get it up to 120 millimeters. And it really hammered home that it's the only zoom with 5-beam autofocus. So 5 laser beams for autofocus, and that was apparently a big deal. Nobody else did that at the time. And I found a listing that mentioned manual focusing is not required because of the autofocus. And it also has auto exposure that cannot be set by the photographer. So fully automatic camera, I think. But if the specs that I found are correct, the shutter speeds were between 1/350th of a second to 1/4 of a second. And film sensitivities, depending on what you put in there, were between ISO 25 to 3200. So a decent range from everything I can tell. Built-in flash, which boasts up to 6 meters at ISO 100, according to the manual. I have no idea how that compares to other flashes, as that's the first time in all the research I've done that I can recall reading about how many meters a particular flash can put out. Usually they just go, it's a flash. But also, there's a piece of technology on this. Red eye prevention. I have no idea how they're actually achieving this at this point in time, but it's interesting because I'd basically forgotten about red eye in cameras. You take a flash photography picture of someone and their eyes would be bright red. I'm fairly certain that this was not the first camera ever made with that kind of technology, but I'm actually not able to find out very easily what camera was the first one to have that technology. And I have, again, no idea how they're doing that on a film camera. Digitally, totally makes sense. You can use face detection nowadays and things to not have the red in there, and they can specifically take that out. Like, all of that makes total sense with computers. But on an analog camera for film, I really don't know how they do that. Maybe it's a certain filter when you take a flash photo. I'll have to research more into that, and that's unfortunately not something that I have known off the top of my head, but it's pretty cool. But that's about all that I could find about the Minolta Freedom Zoom 90. I would actually like to get some batteries to put in here. It takes that special kind of double battery. I don't think it takes double A's, does it? No, 2CR5 6-volt. Those are not a common battery size, so I might get that. It's another one, a great contender for one day. We're talking about it. One day, I'll set up a dark room and actually try playing with these old film cameras. See if they're working, see if I can get them to a working state if they're not, and take some pictures with them and see how they all kind of compare and turn out for the vintage collection. But until then, it goes on a shelf behind me. Another big thanks to my dad for being able to send me all these old cameras that he finds on auction sites and passes them along. It really expands the cool background that we've got, and I really enjoyed being able to research them and learn about these different cameras. I had never heard of basically any of them at any point in time. Next week, you'll never guess it, we got another Polaroid to talk about.